More dad stories. I figure I better tell these before I get so darn old I forget everything. My dad loved to tell the story about the locusts. One time, he's a kid, he's living in South Dakota in the Great Depression, and they had a plague of locusts. My dad said it was just like something out of the Old Testament. Sometimes there were so many locusts in the sky, the whole sky would turn black middle of the day, and you'd think it was night. There'd be so many locusts on the road, you could slip and slide and wind up in the ditch if you weren't careful. One time, the whole family was driving home from church, and my grandma looks up and she sees a house and she goes, "Why would Alice Olson paint her house black?" But it wasn't painted black. It was just entirely covered with locusts. Oh, metal tires. All the tractors back then had metal tires, not rubber tires. And the farmers believed that they had to have metal tires. Rubber tires would crush down the dirt, they believed, and make it impossible for anything to grow. This is a Waterloo Boy tractor. These were actually made in my hometown, Waterloo, Iowa. Well, the John Deere company thought it was a good idea to introduce rubber tires, and so there was a salesman out in the area, and they were trying to talk to farmers into using these rubber tires, and not a single one of these farmers would use rubber tires. Well, finally, the farmer my dad worked for, he thought he'd give her a try. But he said he wanted those tires for free, and darned if they did, they gave him absolutely free tires. And then every couple of days, the other farmers would show up, and what are you crazy? Now let me see those crazy rubber tires. You know that's going to wreck your fields. And the farmer would say, "Well, why don't you go try her out, Bob? Do some plowing out there." And he ended up getting about half his fields plowed by other people. And the next summer, every single one of those farmers had rubber tires on his tractor. Oh, running boards. That farmer that my dad worked for. My dad loves to tell funny stories about this guy. He had a running board on his car, like that, and he figured out a way to electrify it. He hooked it up to the battery with wires, kind of like you do an electric fence or something. He had a switch inside the car, and if you flip that switch, that whole running board would be electrified. And then he went to the church picnic. And at church picnic, there are a lot of couples there and looking for places to sit, have their picnic lunch. And when he told, "Oh, you can sit here on my running board," and this young man sits there, and his girl plops down right in his lap, and the farmer's zap, and the girl goes, "What's the matter, honey?" And he goes, "Well, honey, I don't feel anything." My dad loved to tell that story. Oh, this Dad and the Squirrel. This is a famous painting by a guy named Copley, or at least a detail of that painting. My dad loved animals, just had a lot of stories about animals ever since he was a kid. Oh, you see those ruffly cuffs, though. My dad would never have had cuffs like that. Well, after college, my dad got a teaching job. He taught something, I think it was business math. And he really didn't excite the students, and this kind of bothered my dad. What could he do to make those students a little more attentive, a little more interested in school? And one afternoon after school, he's looking out the window of his classroom, and there's a bunch of trees out there, and there's one tree real close to his classroom window, and my dad he sees a squirrel, and my dad's looking at the squirrel, and the squirrel's looking at my dad, and my dad gets an idea. So the next day, he comes in with a bag of peanuts, and students are all there. My dad doesn't say anything, but he goes back there and he opens up the window and he puts a couple peanuts right down there on the ledge. And darned if a squirrel, after a little bit, doesn't hop down and eat those peanuts. So after that, the next day, my dad, he puts the peanuts inside the window ledge. And he goes away and he starts teaching business math. And the students are kind of poking each other and noticing what's going on. And the squirrel, this time, he actually comes in a little bit. Well, my dad keeps this up. He never talks about it. He never says a word to the students about what's going on. But of course, all the students know. Every day, my dad puts a couple peanuts over there on the window ledge. And then he starts putting peanuts on the floor. And after a while, that squirrel, he comes in and he eats a peanut from the window ledge. And then he hops down right onto the floor where the students are. And he eats some more peanuts. And my dad just keeps on and gets the squirrel to come farther and farther into the room. Until finally, my dad puts a pile of peanuts on the teacher's desk, and darned if that squirrel doesn't hop all the way up on the desk to eat his peanuts. And the whole time, my dad never says a word about it, and the kids never say a word about it, but my dad is like the coolest teacher in the whole school by that time. Well, every story about a classroom, I guess, has to have a bad kid. There's a kid, and he's sitting over there by the window, and he's watching this squirrel eat the peanuts up on the teacher's desk, and he gets an idea. And his idea is he'll close the window. So he jumps up and bang, he closes that window. And it takes the squirrel about a minute to realize what has happened. But when he does, that squirrel lets out a scream and he starts running around the room at high speed, but there's no way to get out. The kids go crazy, and my dad has to go over there and open the window, and the squirrel manages to escape back to a tree outside. After that, my dad would peer out the window, and sometimes he'd see the squirrel out there, but never again. No matter how many peanuts my dad put on that window ledge, never again did the squirrel enter the classroom. Not too much later, it was Pearl Harbor. Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and my dad got drafted. And that was the end of his teaching career.